guys, welcome back to Whole Wellness. I'm Anne, and thanks for tuning in to my channel where we talk about everything having to do with wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, relationships, lifestyle, exercise, food, clothing, you name it. Although I pretty much tend to focus on mental and emotional health because that is where I'm at in my life. Today, I just wanted to pop on and talk a little bit about our responsibility in our relationships and our responsibility dealing with toxic people. I think 100% of the time, we also play a role. And what I mean by that is one of the reasons that our toxic relationships, if we're dealing with a toxic person, a truly toxic person, I think one of the reasons that these relationships tend to spiral out of control is because we're not managing ourselves the way we should in any given situation. There's a difference between a person that has the intention and drive to be good and do good and change what they know is faulty about themselves and has the desire to be accountable and responsible for their own behaviors or weaknesses or challenges or speed bumps that they run into, and a person who just blatantly does not care or says that they care, but then they really don't show any effort. And that's where we come in, and that's where we hold the responsibility in our relationships. I should say that 50-50 balance, because a relationship has to be mutual. There has to be give and take on both parts. When we feel triggered by the things that they're doing or saying, our responsibility is to examine why we're triggered. And what it means to be triggered is there's a very unequal emotional response to a stimulus of some sort. Like someone can say or do something and we react strongly, either angrily, with venom, we're defensive, we explain, we start crying. They may say something that is hurtful and unkind or disrespectful, but we have to consider it at least a little bit, consider the source, consider their tone, consider their purpose and their goal, and then decide whether this person actually is trying to engage or trying to bait us into a reaction, or whether they genuinely are speaking from the heart because they care and love for us and want things to be better. And we can be, including myself, I can be very reactive, and that is something I never realized until I started to get healthy. And I see myself being reactive a lot more than I ever expected. This was something that I previously didn't know about myself. And once I became aware and went through counseling and started paying a lot more attention, I started realizing how reactive I actually am. I am an emotional person. I am connected to my emotions, but it's a whole nother thing to listen to what someone's saying, take it in, and actually absorb it, internalize it, and accept it as truth. Or just being, like I talked about in my prior video, being a force field where you allow them to say whatever it is they're going to say, but you don't necessarily accept it or reject it. You kind of consider it, consider the source, weigh the truth of it, find out and analyze it with logic and reason and truth and honesty. Is there any amount of truth about what they're saying? And if there is, address those things for yourself. You don't need to announce it to anybody else, but address it for yourself and work on those things, but don't allow yourself to be triggered and react to the point where your reaction is excessive or unreasonable considering the trigger, considering the stimulus. And this piggybacks the prior video, because what we talked about in the prior video about no one can make us do anything, and that's so true in every circumstance. And yet we allow people to trigger us so much emotionally and mentally. We don't realize that mentally we are capable of being stronger than what they believe we are. because we're so emotional, we tend to be reactive. And a lot of us, because of our trauma and our abuse, are reactive because we have been victims. We've been pushed down. We've been victimized for so long that we are in that mode of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, so we're either succumbing continually to more abuse and being more and more oppressed, and a human can only take so much. So then we break and we freak out and we just lose our shit, or we run away from the problem and we sever ties with relationships with people who may genuinely care for us or love us, but we leave because they're triggering something within us that we haven't addressed. Or like me, I had to fight. I grew up responding to everything, almost everything, with this fight response. And so that made me an adult which is really ironic. And I find this very fascinating. And I'll probably do another follow-up video on to this extent about reactions and triggers, and me personally, my experience, because what happened with me is throughout my young adult life, through and well into adulthood, to the point I got into counseling in 2020, I have been a fighter with my family. I've had my claws out, my fists bared, my teeth snarling. Like, I've been very defensive and in a fight mode with them. Everyone else in my life, I am a patsy. Like, I accept anyone into my intimate circle, and gotten to the point where I just love everybody and accept everybody, and I don't have those filters and boundaries out about whether this person is really good for me, whether it's a person that I really should spend time with or that I want to spend time with because they are a kind, caring, respectful, loving person. So it's interesting to me that with my family, I've been fighting for so long. Sorry about that, guys. I tried to find a spot to vlog where it's private, but this park that I go to, although it tends to be very private and quiet, a lot of times people are just ignorant. And even though you are parked off in a corner somewhere and kind of doing your own thing, and it's obvious that I have my camera set up on my tripod on my dashboard, there's any number of places around this park where they could walk because it's a big park, and there's trails all over the place and a big parking lot. They inevitably want to see what I'm doing and check it out, and so they come and they walk right past my vehicle. And so I just started up my vehicle and drove to a different area on the parking lot. So just to wrap up, like what I was saying is, we are responsible for part of our interactions with others in order to avoid explosions and inflaming and contributing to a toxic relationship. We don't want a toxic relationship. And so that can only manifest and build if we're contributing to it. It stands to reason that if we don't want an unhealthy relationship with someone, if we don't want a toxic relationship with someone, then we don't have to have that relationship. We don't have to respond. We don't have to engage. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are not contributing to the continuance of a bad relationship. And that's why we shouldn't respond to someone who's antagonizing us. Because if we're responding or we're reacting or we're allowing what they say or do to infiltrate or poison us, then we're actually fostering a toxic relationship. And that's our responsibility. That's on us. We have to take responsibility for the fact that we do own some part of a toxic relationship. If we are in a toxic relationship, that means that there's a part of us that's not healthy, and we need to explore that. And these toxic people wouldn't exist. They wouldn't poison others if they weren't poisoned themselves. So the only way that things are going to change and relationships are going to get better and people are going to become better at life is if we recognize it in ourselves and don't engage and don't foster an environment where relationships are toxic. It's not easy to do, and I don't mean to imply that it is. All that to say that, honestly, I think it's very important for each of us to pay attention to that never-ending question of, am I contributing to this toxic relationship? Am I contributing to the perpetuation of a toxic engagement with this person? Because if we are playing a role, that's what we have control over. If we're playing a role, an active role in responding or whatever to a toxic interaction that progresses and continues and perpetuates, then that's what we can control. We can't control what the other person does. And that's just, that's part of that radical acceptance that we have to get to that point where we say, I can't control it. I don't pull the puppet strings. I can't make them happy. I can't make them do anything, but nor can they with us. They can antagonize us. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want, as long as we're talking about verbal here, not physical. Very specifically, they can bait us and bait us and bait us. But we don't have to respond. We don't have to retaliate. We can just shrug and say, that's your opinion. You can say whatever you want. All we can do is carry the responsibility of our behavior. And if we're not contributing to this toxic relationship, the toxic relationship fizzles out. It's no different than a fire that's starved of oxygen. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Till next time. Bye for now.